about these proposed amendments, but not within the precincts of County Hall. Listen to Senator James Orengo, who said these proposed amendments will effectively make the commission a lame duck.
In effect, this law is going to create a lame duck commission. And I think even presently, this commission is out of its depth.
Well, he's not the only one. Like we told you, there was also others. I want to remind you that we'll be speaking to Dr. Ekuru Aukot in just a moment because he also made his submissions there. But then also today, the chair and vice of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights were present today. Kagwiria Mbogori, who is the chair of the commission, highlighted a caution with the proposed quorum being reduced to 3 from the constitutional 5. Listen.
Where there is no consensus or unanimous decision in the IBC Commission, 2 commissioners, one commissioner and their body can make a binding decision on the commission, because if the quorum is 3 and 2 out of 3 agree, then this country can be the cause of can be held by a decision that was just made by 2 people, and I think that is not. We don't feel that is okay, and we have made that. We feel that this is a clear departure from the electoral reforms adopted and entrenched in the Elections Act in 2016 last year through a bipartisan and all-inclusive process spearheaded by the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee.
That's the chair of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So let's speak to Dr. Ekuru Aukot, is the leader of Third Way Alliance Kenya. And he was present there and made his remarks known. He's joining us tonight on The Big Story. Dr. Aukot, good evening and thank you for joining us. I just want to start off with a statement that you made earlier with respect to these amendments. I quote, you said you cannot kill your mother and inherit her. What does this mean?
Well, basically, it simply means that, you cannot legislate for your own benefit, but then at the same time, honestly, undermining the very, very constitution that you want to, or the laws that you want to strengthen. I think if you look at the nature of the amendments, basically what we are saying is the intention is to try and perfect the management of our election. But I think at the same time, you are also actually undermining the very, very election laws and constitution. In fact, if you look at the ambit of all the proposed amendments from our statement as we've explained, they largely are unconstitutional. Actually, they change nothing. In fact, the effect of those amendments is that it doesn't change the constitution at all. They will definitely be challenged. I'm sure some Kenyan will go out there and move the court to declare the striking of some of those provisions. They really had no value because at the same time, I mean, look, you say that the constitution, I mean, the proposed amendments must help us effectively manage the election. But to be honest with you, I think the timing of them is very suspect. And secondly, you cannot apply them retrospectively on a matter that has already been determined. They are so personalized. It's like they are almost being legislated for a particular individual, to protect a particular individual. In fact, they're even targeting people like myself and others in the context that we never, we were not a petitioner in the annulled presidential election. So it's really an oxymoron, it's a misnomer, to say the least.
All right. Well, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, whilst that was had been a push for a very long time in this country, it really did start to come to fruition after the debacle of the 2007 election. What are your thoughts as being one of the chief drafters of this law with respect to the events that we have seen in this country from the Supreme Court petition, which you were a part of and you were party to the point at which we find ourselves now? What are your reflections?
Well, I think what is happening, the unfortunate thing is that we are beginning to actually claw back on the constitutional gains. Instead of us perfecting the Constitution, breathing life into it so that it can actually serve us effectively, we have somehow personalized this Constitution. Because if you look at, for example, the amendments, the attempt is to amend the constitution through the back door, but actually they don't do it because they don't really bring an amendment to the constitution. Let me just pick one particular example. If you read Article 138, I believe sub-Article 3, about the management of election and the fact that the IEBC, after tallying, must announce the results. Now, the amendment seems to suggest that any commissioner or anybody else could actually announce, or trying to remove the power of the chairperson of IEBC to be able to announce the results. Now, you see, it doesn't really have any value, these amendments. I think they are very reactionary. I think they undermine the Constitution itself. So, for me, the unfortunate thing is that Parliament has allowed itself to be abused or misused by the executive. Instead of Parliament being the vanguard, the protector of the Constitution, as it was intended, as it was passed by 67% of Kenyans, it's allowing itself to be misused in the manner in which legislations are going to be made. For example, one would expect that the legislative process will be inclusive from two perspectives. Number one, from the perspective of the members of Parliament themselves. This particular committee is actually one-sided. So again, it actually fails the constitutionality test, which is of inclusion, transparency, accountability, and all those values and principles that are laid down in Article 10 of the Kenya Constitution.
The claim is that NASA refused to participate, that they were invited and have been asked, in fact, they were asked to present their members to this committee, but they have chosen not to.
Okay, it's unfortunate that NASA refused to participate, but look at the mischief of these amendments. First of all, they're very reactionary. And I think the timing for me is what is the problem, because it's instead of really calming the political tensions in the country, in my view, it's actually heightening these tensions. It's bringing even more divisions. It is almost like an idea that we will show you we have the tyranny of numbers. I think for me, the timing is very bad for the country. And it's because of that timing, because of the heightened political tensions right now, it's probably the reason why NASA reacted the way it reacted. We could have also chosen to boycott, but I think we believe that we needed to put our position known out there and to the committee, even to point out the fact that, listen, we need to show leadership at this time in the country where we don't have to create more divisions because we think we have an advantage either in the National Assembly or in the Senate. I think the country right now is in a very, very delicate situation. What is required at the very most is leadership. Leadership with integrity, okay. Leadership that will not exploit any opportunity at this time to divide us even more. And that, for me, is what I would have expected the leadership of the Legislature National Assembly to say. Because, after all, like I think at a very rare occasion, I will agree with the Chairman Wafula Chebukati that we actually do not need a new law to manage the repeat election. The Supreme Court was very clear. Go and repeat this election in accordance to Article 140, sub-Article 3 of the Constitution. So we don't really need to amend the Elections Act. And even if we amend it anyway, it will be inconsequential because it will not apply to the repeat election.
All right. I want to talk about that because we're expecting the Chair Wafula Chebukati. You can see on your screens, on your right-hand side, I believe, pictures of County Hall. We're waiting for him any moment now. But Dr. Aukot, you speak about the Chair, and I wonder to what extent we can discuss your disagreement with how they chose to interpret the Supreme Court verdict, which was, as you say, to repeat the election in accordance with the Constitution. You have been left out of that process, and you have taken issue with their interpretation of it by just having the top two candidates during the August 8th election. Without going into the details, I think it's just important for you to remind our viewers that this is something you are still pursuing, even with 20 days to go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a very important question, Yvonne, and of course one that I would not want to discuss in details here because we want to give Justice John Mativo the opportunity to be able to pronounce himself with some finality on this. But the papers are presented, the petition are presented before the High Court, which was heard yesterday by Justice Mativo up until about 8 p.m., was basically to challenge the actions of the IEBC chairperson when he gazetted the then President-elect Uhuru Kenyatta and only Raila. Our argument is very simple, that he has actually misunderstood the directive from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was specific about a repeat presidential election in Article 140 sub-Article 3 because the results have been nullified, annulled, and actually declared null and void as if it never happened. So ideally, everybody else who participated in the August 8th election could have been allowed to participate if they so wished. What he has done is he has interpreted that to mean a runoff, which is under Article 138, sub-Article 4 and 5 of the Constitution. The idea basically being that somebody did not meet the 50+1 threshold as required, and therefore the Constitution is very clear that in such an instance, only number 1 and number 2 could participate in a repeat election, which is basically known commonly as a runoff. But in this particular instance, the judgment was basically clear that the election was not held in accordance with the Constitution and the election law, and therefore there was no way you could have determined a winner. And that's why the Supreme Court refused, and this is the judgment, it's not my words, the Supreme Court refused to be invited into discussing numbers as to who actually got what numbers. Because they say, no. Even before we go to the numbers, because, even a goat, a cow, could have been declared president-elect. But the question really we interrogated was, we could have asked is, did a cow participate in an election? Is a cow allowed to participate in an election in Kenya? That is the import. And I think what Chebukati misunderstood, and this is really the problem I have with Chebukati generally, I think that is one chairman who is continuing to disgrace IEBC. He keeps flip-flopping. He doesn't seem to understand his role. He's at the level of a Supreme Court judge. He actually... His decision ought to be judicious, advisory, as in interpreting the Constitution. But honestly, I think for me, he has failed. And he has failed in so many instances. Right from when we were going for nomination, he could not interpret basically Article 137 of the Kenya Constitution that talks about the fact that for you to be nominated as a presidential candidate, it has to be at least 2,000 voters in a majority of county. He interpreted to say it has to be members of your party. So I really have a problem with Chebukati understanding the law. I don't know. I mean, not to disrespect him at this stage, but I think there are serious questions as to his grasp of the Constitution, because he's supposed to give guidance to the country.
All right, thanks very much for that, and we'll continue to follow that case before Justice Mativo. That is Dr. Ekuru Aukot, who's the leader of the Third Way Alliance of Kenya, also made his presentations to that joint select committee at County Hall, from where we are expecting the chair, Wafula Chebukati, and his fellow commissioners any moment now. Those pictures on your screen coming from the County Hall here in Nairobi. Will he show up? What time will he do so? Today is the last day. Will they be seeking an extension to enable him and his fellow colleagues, fellow commissioners, to give their views? Our Timothy Otieno is there live, and of course he'll continue to update us in the coming hour. That is if and when they do make an appearance. That continues to be a big story tonight. It's still unfolding even as we speak, but you want to stay with KTN News where you get the whole story. We will continue with our coverage of this big story today. My thanks to all our guests, Senator Moses Kajwang, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, the Solicitor General of this country, Nje Muturi, and to Sophia Ornuna, our lead reporter here on the show. That's it for us this week. We'll catch you again next week when we will be tracing the big story. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Good night. KTN Prime is up next.